The crack of a rifle echoed through the mountain pass as Hannah Sinclair's horse reared up in panic, sending the wagon lurching sideways against the uneven terrain. The sharp sound of splintering wood confirmed what she feared most stranded on Raven's Peak, with storm clouds gathering above the Colorado Rockies and not another soul for miles. At least, that's what she thought until the silhouette of a rider appeared through the swirling dust. October 1878 had brought an early chill to the Colorado territory, and Hannah wasn't prepared for what lay ahead. At 26, she'd faced plenty of hardships since her husband's death 2 years prior, but traversing the treacherous mountain pass alone to reach her sister in Denver hadn't been her wisest decision. "Whoa there," a deep voice called out as the rider approached. He dismounted with practiced ease, his tall frame cloaked in a worn leather duster. "Looks like you've got yourself in quite a predicament, madam." Hannah clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, eyeing the stranger cautiously. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but she could make out a strong jawline covered with several days' worth of stubble. "The wheel," she said, gesturing helplessly toward the damaged wagon. "Something spooked my horse, and when I pulled too hard on the reins, no need to explain," he interrupted, crouching to examine the damage. He pushed his hat back, revealing eyes the color of a summer sky. "Cracked clean through, you won't make it another mile on this." Hannah's heart sank. "But I need to reach Denver before snow," he finished, glancing at the darkening sky. "I'll fix it before snow comes, that's a promise, miss." "Mrs. Hannah Sinclair," she corrected, the title still feeling strange on her tongue despite the years that had passed. "And you are." He stood, dusting off his hands on his worn denims. "Folks call me Fletcher Norwood. Got a place about 3 miles east of here. I can help you get this wheel fixed, but we'd best hurry." He pointed to the threatening clouds. "Weather turns fast up here this time of year." Hannah hesitated. Her mother's warnings about strangers rang in her ears, but the alternative was spending the night alone on the mountain with a storm approaching. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Norwood, but a distant rumble of thunder made her decision for her. I don't mean to press, Mrs. Sinclair, but that storm's not waiting on your deliberation," Fletcher said, already moving to unhitch her horse. "My cabin's not much, but it's dry, warm, and I give you my word as a gentleman that you'll be safe." Something in his straightforward manner reassured her. Hannah nodded, gathering her most valuable possessions from the wagon, her father's pocket watch, a small leather pouch of coins, and her journal. "I can salvage the wheel and fix it at my place," Fletcher explained, expertly removing the damaged wheel. "Got tools and some seasoned oak that should do the trick." He secured it to his horse, then helped Hannah mount her own. "We can come back for the rest of your belongings tomorrow." They rode side by side, the mountain path narrowing as they descended. Hannah stole glances at her unexpected rescuer, noting the way he sat tall in the saddle, how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about his weathered features. "You're not from around these parts," Fletcher observed, breaking the silence. "Is it that obvious?" Hannah asked. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Most locals know better than to cross Raven's Peak this late in the season. Where are you headed?" "Denver." "My sister's expecting her first child. I'm all the family she has left," Fletcher nodded. "Noble reason to risk the pass. Family's important." The first fat drops of rain began to fall as a small cabin came into view, nestled among a stand of pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a corral stood adjacent with 3 horses seeking shelter beneath a lean-to. "Someone's at your home," Hannah remarked, suddenly wary again. "Just my ranch hand, Emilio. He tends things when I'm out." Fletcher dismounted and helped Hannah down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "He makes a mean venison stew, too, which I'm guessing might be on the fire tonight." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's dwelling. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its warmth filling the modest space. Simple furniture, obviously handcrafted, was arranged practically. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes that surprised Hannah with their variety. A middle-aged Mexican man turned from the stove, his eyebrows rising at the sight of Hannah. "Emilio, this is Mrs. Sinclair. Her wagon's had an accident on the pass, Fletcher explained, hanging his duster on a peg by the door. She'll be staying until I can fix her wheel. Emilio nodded respectfully. Welcome, Senora, the stew will be ready soon. I'll show you where you can rest, Fletcher said, leading Hannah toward a door at the back of the main room. You can take my bedroom, I'll bunk with Emilio in the loft. I couldn't possibly. I insist, he said firmly. My mother raised me better than to let a lady sleep anywhere but the best bed available. The bedroom was simple but clean, with a sturdy bed covered in a handmade quilt and a small window overlooking the mountains. There's water in the pitcher for washing up, Fletcher said, lingering in the doorway. Take your time, dinner won't be for another hour. Left alone, Hannah sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. The scent of pine and leather permeated the room, his scent, she realized with a curious flutter in her stomach. She hadn't felt such a flutter since before Thomas fell ill. After washing the trail dust from her face and hands, Hannah found a comb in her small bundle of possessions and attempted to restore order to her honey-brown hair. She pinched her cheeks for color and straightened her travel-worn dress as best she could before rejoining the men. The stew was indeed excellent, rich with herbs and tender meat. Fletcher kept the conversation light, asking about her journey but never prying too deeply. Emilio spoke little but watched with knowing eyes that made Hannah wonder what he was thinking. After dinner, Fletcher pulled out tools and began examining the damaged wheel by lamplight. Can it be fixed? Hannah asked, standing nearby with a cup of coffee warming her hands. Fletcher nodded. The hub's intact and only 2 spokes need replacing, the rims cracked but salvageable. I'll start on it at first light. I'm grateful, Mr. Norwood. Not many would stop to help a stranger. He looked up, those blue eyes reflecting the golden lamplight. Out here we help each other, it's how we survive. He paused. And it's Fletcher, please, Hannah smiled. Fletcher, then. Outside, the storm raged, rain pelting against the cabin's sturdy walls. Hannah couldn't help but think how differently this night might have ended if Fletcher hadn't come along when he did. Later, lying in Fletcher's bed, surrounded by his things, Hannah stared at the ceiling. The unfamiliar sense of security was puzzling. She'd been on her own for so long, determined to need no one, yet here she was, dependent on a stranger's kindness. Just until the wheel is fixed, she whispered to herself. Then on to Denver. But as sleep claimed her, Hannah couldn't deny the strange feeling that something significant had shifted in her carefully ordered world. Morning brought clear skies and crisp mountain air. Hannah woke to the sounds of activity, the clanging of metal, the low murmur of men's voices. She dressed quickly and found Fletcher already hard at work on the wheel, shaping a new spoke from a piece of oak. You're an early riser, she observed, wrapping her shawl tighter against the morning chill. Sun doesn't wait for the lazy out here, he replied, measuring carefully before making another cut. There's coffee on the stove if you'd like some. Hannah poured herself a cup and returned to watch him work. His hands were calloused but moved with precision, each motion deliberate and skilled. You've done this before, she remarked, a time or two. Used to help the wheelwright back in Missouri before heading west. Fletcher fitted the new spoke into place. What about you? What brought you to Colorado? Hannah sipped her coffee. My husband, Thomas, he had tuberculosis. The doctors said the mountain air might help. It didn't. Fletcher's hands stilled briefly. I'm sorry. It's been 2 years now. My sister Rose is all the family I have left. When she wrote that she was expecting, I knew I needed to be with her. Hannah paused. What about your family? Lost my parents to fever when I was 19. No siblings. Came west with nothing but my horse and my daddy's pocket watch. Fletcher's tone was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. And now you have all this. Hannah gestured to the cabin, the corral with its horses. It's not much, but it's mine. Worked cattle for 5 years to save enough for this land. Now I raise horses, train them too. Selling a few good ones each year keeps me comfortable enough. As the day progressed, Hannah made herself useful, helping Emilio prepare meals and tending to her horse. She found herself watching Fletcher more than she should, admiring the strength in his shoulders as he worked, the quiet competence in everything he did. By mid-afternoon, Fletcher announced that the wheel was nearly ready. Just needs to set overnight with the glue holding those reinforcements. We'll retrieve your wagon tomorrow. You've been more than kind, Hannah said. I wish there was some way to repay you, Fletcher waved away her concerns. Having company other than Emilio is payment enough. He's a good man, but his conversation runs to horses and the weather. Emilio, overhearing, chuckled good-naturedly. And you are better, always with the books and the big ideas, Hannah raised an eyebrow. Books and big ideas? Fletcher looked almost embarrassed. I read when time allows. He reads everything, Emilio corrected. Philosophy, science, poetry. A regular professor in cowboy boots. Hannah's interest was piqued. My father was a schoolteacher. I grew up surrounded by books. That evening, after Emilio retired to the loft, Hannah and Fletcher sat before the fire, discussing literature. Fletcher revealed a depth of thought that surprised and intrigued her, speaking passionately about Emerson and Thoreau. Most people out here wouldn't expect a rancher to quote Whitman, Hannah said. Fletcher stoked the fire. Most people see what they expect to see. A man in worn clothes with dirt under his nails must be simple-minded. I didn't mean, I know you didn't, he smiled, but it's true nonetheless. We all wear masks of some kind. Hannah found herself telling him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's devotion to education, and her mother's dream that Hannah would marry well and live a genteel life. Then I met Thomas at a church social, she continued. He was so different from the polished young men my mother favored, passionate about adventure and seeing the world. When he proposed after just 3 months, I accepted despite my family's concerns. You followed your heart, Fletcher said. I did. And even knowing how it would end, I'd do it again. Hannah stared into the flames, but his illness changed everything. Instead of adventure, we found struggle. Those last months were difficult. Fletcher's expression softened. Yet here you are, crossing mountains alone. You've got grit, Mrs. Sinclair, Hannah, she corrected. If I'm to call you Fletcher, then fair is fair. Hannah, he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. Something passed between them, then a moment of connection that made her breath catch. Fletcher cleared his throat. It's getting late. We should turn in if we're to retrieve your wagon tomorrow. That night, Hannah dreamed of home, not Pennsylvania, but somewhere new, somewhere with mountains visible through windows and the scent of pine in the air. The next morning dawned bright but cold, with frost silvering the grass. Fletcher announced that the wheel was ready, and after breakfast they rode out to recover Hannah's wagon. With Emilio's help, they soon had the repaired wheel mounted and the wagon loaded with Hannah's possessions. Good as new, Fletcher declared, tightening the last bolt. Better even. That oak's stronger than what they used originally. Hannah ran her hand over the smooth repair. I don't know how to thank you. No need, he said, then hesitated. Though, the pass ahead is treacherous this time of year. If you'd consider waiting a few days, I could escort you to Denver. Got some business there myself. Hannah felt both relief and something else, pleasure at the prospect of more time in Fletcher's company. I wouldn't want to impose further. No imposition. Like I said, I'm headed that way regardless. Fletcher busied himself with checking the harness. 3 days to prepare should be sufficient. Those 3 days passed in a comfortable rhythm. Hannah helped with chores around the cabin, finding satisfaction in physical work after months of grief-induced lethargy. Fletcher showed her his small herd of horses, including a spirited black mare he was training for a buyer in Denver. She's beautiful, Hannah said, watching the horse prance around the corral. Intelligent, too. Horses are better judges of character than most people. Fletcher offered Hannah an apple. Here, she might take this from you. The mare approached cautiously, nostrils flaring. Hannah stood still, arm extended. After a moment's consideration, the horse delicately took the offering from her palm. Fletcher grinned. She likes you, that's a good sign. Of what? His eyes met hers. That you can be trusted. Hannah felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the autumn sun. More and more, she found herself drawn to this quiet, thoughtful man who defied every expectation. On the evening before their departure, Emilio prepared a special meal and then tactfully made himself scarce, claiming he needed to check on a pregnant mare. Alone by the fire, Hannah and Fletcher spoke of their pasts and cautiously of the future. Will you stay in Denver with your sister? Fletcher asked, swirling the last of his coffee in his cup. Hannah considered. For a while, beyond that I haven't decided. There's nothing drawing me back to Pennsylvania. Colorado has a way of getting under your skin, Fletcher said. The winters are harsh, but there's something about watching spring come to these mountains that makes it all worthwhile. You sound like you'll never leave. Fletcher looked into the fire. This land is part of me now. I can't imagine being anywhere else. The unspoken question hung between them. Where did Hannah belong? The journey to Denver would take 4 days in good weather. They set out at dawn, Hannah driving her wagon with Fletcher riding alongside on his sturdy gelding, leading the black mare. The first day passed pleasantly, the mountain scenery spectacular as autumn painted the aspen groves gold against the evergreen backdrop. That night, they made camp in a sheltered valley. Fletcher built a fire while Hannah prepared a simple meal from the provisions Emilio had packed. "You're handy around a campfire," Fletcher observed, watching her confidently arrange the coffee pot among the coals. "Thomas and I spent months traveling before settling in Colorado Springs. I learned quickly." Hannah smiled at the memory. "He was hopeless at cooking. Said that's why he married me." "I doubt that was the only reason," Fletcher said quietly. Hannah looked up, caught by the intensity in his eyes. For a moment neither spoke, the crackle of the fire the only sound between them. Finally, Fletcher cleared his throat. "We should rest. There's a steep grade tomorrow." They retired to separate sides of the fire, but Hannah lay awake long after Fletcher's breathing had deepened into sleep. The stars seemed impossibly bright through the branches above, and for the first time in years, she felt a flutter of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. The second day brought them through narrow passes where the wagon barely fit between towering rock faces. Fletcher stayed close, sometimes dismounting to guide Hannah's horse through particularly difficult stretches. His concern was touching. Without being overbearing, he respected her capability while offering assistance when truly needed. As they made camp the second night, Hannah noticed Fletcher wincing as he lifted supplies from his saddlebag. "You're hurt," she said. "Old injury, acts up sometimes." He rotated his shoulder stiffly. "Took a fall during a roundup 3 years back. Shoulder never quite healed right." Without thinking, Hannah moved behind him. "My grandmother was a healer of sorts, taught me a few things about sore muscles." Her hands found his shoulder, feeling the knotted tension beneath his shirt. "May I?" Fletcher hesitated, then nodded. Hannah began working the tight muscles with firm, practiced movements. He was solid beneath her touch, warm despite the evening chill. She felt him gradually relax as she worked. "That's remarkable," he murmured as she found a particularly tight knot and released it. "Grandmother always said most pain comes from fighting against what the body needs," Hannah replied, suddenly aware of how intimate this moment had become. Her hands on him beneath the vast sky, Fletcher turned slowly to face her, her hands still resting on his shoulders. "Your grandmother sounds wise." His voice was husky in the gathering darkness. "She was," Hannah whispered, unable to look away from his face now so close to hers. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might kiss her. Then a distant wolf howl broke the spell. Fletcher stepped back and the moment passed. "Thank you," he said formally. "It feels much better." That night, Hannah dreamed of his hands on her instead, gentle yet sure. The third day brought a change in the weather. Dark clouds gathered to the north, and Fletcher frowned at them frequently. "Doesn't look good," he admitted when Hannah questioned him. "Snow's coming sooner than I expected. We'll need to make better time." They pushed harder, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. By evening, the temperature had dropped dramatically, and the first few snowflakes began to swirl around them. "We can't stop yet," Fletcher decided, eyeing the thickening snowfall. "There's a line shack about 2 hours ahead, better shelter than what we'd manage out here." The snow intensified as they pressed on, accumulating quickly on the trail. Hannah's hands grew numb on the reins despite her gloves. Beside her, Fletcher was a reassuring presence, occasionally calling out encouragement. The line shack appeared as little more than a dark shape in the whiteout conditions. Fletcher helped Hannah unhitch her horse and led both animals into a small lean-to attached to the cabin. Inside, the shack was basic but sound: a single room with a small stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs and a narrow cot. Not exactly luxurious, Fletcher apologized, quickly building a fire in the stove, but it'll keep us from freezing. As warmth gradually filled the space, Hannah shed her snow-dusted coat and helped Fletcher unpack their supplies. The close quarters made her acutely aware of him, the brush of his arm as he moved past her, the scent of leather and cold air that clung to his clothes. "Storm like this could last a day or more," Fletcher said, looking out the single small window at the swirling white. "We might be here a while." Hannah nodded, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at the thought of being alone with him in this intimate space. "At least we're safe." They shared a simple meal of jerky, hard biscuits, and coffee. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shack's sturdy walls. When they'd finished eating, an awkward silence fell between them. "You should take the cot," Fletcher said finally. "I'll make do on the floor." "Don't be ridiculous," Hannah protested. "It's freezing and that floor won't do your shoulder any favors. The cot's wide enough to share if we're careful." Fletcher's eyes widened slightly. "Mrs. Sinclair, Hannah, that wouldn't be proper." "Freezing to death isn't proper either," she countered. "We're both adults. We can manage one night side by side without compromising anyone's virtue." Fletcher looked like he wanted to argue further, but another vicious gust of wind decided the matter. "Very well, but I'll stay on top of the blankets, you underneath." Hannah couldn't help but smile at his gallantry. "As you wish." They arranged themselves awkwardly on the narrow cot, Hannah beneath the blankets, Fletcher above them with his coat spread over him. Despite the barrier of blankets between them, Hannah was intensely conscious of his solid warmth beside her, the rhythm of his breathing. "Thank you," she said softly into the darkness. "For what?" "For stopping when my wheel broke. For helping a stranger." Fletcher was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps it was fate." "Do you believe in fate?" Hannah asked, turning her head to look at his profile in the dim light from the banked stove. "I believe that sometimes paths cross for a reason." His voice was thoughtful. "When I saw you there on the pass, something told me to stop." "Not just common decency, but something more." Hannah's heart quickened. "I'm glad you listened to that something." Fletcher turned to face her, their faces now inches apart. "Hannah, I don't want to presume anything, but these past days with you have been—" "I know," she whispered. "For me too." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Fletcher leaned closer and brushed his lips against hers, a question more than a kiss. Hannah answered by pressing forward, her hand finding his face. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness melting away in the warmth of connection. Fletcher's hand cupped her cheek, his touch reverent. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "I've wanted to do that since I first saw you," Fletcher admitted. Hannah smiled, touching her fingers to his lips. "Even covered in dust with a broken wagon wheel, especially then. You looked fierce and determined, not defeated." Hannah kissed him again, marveling at how right it felt. They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams, interrupted frequently by kisses that grew increasingly passionate. Yet Fletcher maintained the boundary of the blankets between them, his respect for her evident even as desire burned in his eyes. "Denver is still waiting," Hannah whispered as exhaustion finally began to claim them. "What happens when we reach the city?" Fletcher tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "That depends on you. I have business there for a week. After that, I head home." "And if I wanted to see more of Colorado?" Hannah asked, her meaning clear. Fletcher's smile was slow and warm. "I know a place with a view of the mountains that can't be beat." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the howling storm outside no match for the warmth they'd found together. Morning brought sunshine and a transformed world, every surface glittering with fresh snow. They set out again, the trail challenging but navigable. Hannah found herself looking at Fletcher differently now, not just with gratitude, but with growing affection and desire. Their conversations flowed easily, punctuated by lingering glances and occasional touches that sent electricity through her. By late afternoon of the fourth day, Denver came into view in the valley below a sprawling town of wooden buildings and bustling streets. "Your sister's address?" Fletcher asked as they approached the city limits. Hannah provided it, and Fletcher guided them through the growing town to a neat house on a tree-lined street. Before they could dismount, the front door flew open and a heavily pregnant woman rushed out as quickly as her condition allowed. "Hannah," Rose cried, her face alight with joy. You made it. I was so worried with the early snow. Hannah embraced her sister, tears of happiness stinging her eyes. I had help, she said, turning to introduce Fletcher. Rose's knowing gaze took in the way they stood together. I see that, she said with a smile. Please, both of you come in. My husband Richard will be home soon, and you must stay for dinner, Mr. Norwood. Fletcher accepted graciously, helping unload Hannah's trunk before seeing to the horses. Inside, Rose immediately cornered Hannah in the kitchen. Who is he really? She demanded in a whisper. And don't tell me he's just someone who fixed your wagon. I saw how he looks at you. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. It's complicated. We only met a week ago. Sometimes a week is all it takes, Rose said wisely. After Thomas, I never thought I'd see that light in your eyes again. Neither did I, Hannah admitted. He's different from anyone I've known. Thoughtful, kind, educated, but practical. And clearly smitten with you. Rose squeezed her hand. What will you do now? Hannah glanced toward the front of the house where Fletcher's deep voice could be heard greeting Rose's husband. I don't know yet. I came to be with you to help with the baby. And I'm grateful, Rose said. But Hannah, happiness found you on that mountain pass. Don't let it go without consideration. Dinner was a lively affair, with Richard and Fletcher discovering shared interests in horse breeding and local politics. Watching Fletcher charm her family, Hannah felt something settle inside her, a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced in years. Later, as Fletcher prepared to leave for his hotel, Hannah walked him to his horse. Your sister and her husband are good people, Fletcher said. You'll be happy here. For a time, Hannah agreed. Rose says the baby is due in 3 weeks. Fletcher nodded, hesitating before mounting his horse. My business should conclude in a week. I thought I might call on you before heading back to the ranch, if that would be welcome. Hannah stepped closer, placing her hand on his chest. Very welcome. He kissed her then, a promise in his touch. Until then, he murmured against her lips. The week that followed was both interminable and swift. Hannah helped Rose prepare for the baby, sewing tiny garments and organizing the nursery. Yet her thoughts constantly returned to Fletcher, wondering where in the city he might be, what he was doing. True to his word, he appeared at Rose's door exactly 1 week later, hat in hand and freshly shaved. Rose tactfully made herself scarce as Hannah and Fletcher sat in the parlor, the proper distance between them undermined by the heat in their eyes. My business is concluded, Fletcher said. I've sold the black mare to a banker for his daughter and purchased supplies for the winter. When do you leave? Hannah asked, dreading the answer. Tomorrow morning. Fletcher leaned forward. Hannah, I know it's sudden, but these past days without you have been empty. I find myself thinking of you constantly. Hannah's heart raced. I've thought of you too. I have no right to ask this, but Fletcher took a deep breath. Would you consider returning with me, not as a guest, but to stay, to see if what's between us might grow into something lasting? Hannah stared at him, stunned by the directness of his proposal. You're asking me to come live with you, unmarried, Fletcher flushed. No, that's not. I'm making a mess of this. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm asking if you'd consider becoming my wife. Not immediately, you should have time to know your own mind, but I have a small cabin on my property, built for Emilio before he decided to stay in the main house. You could live there properly while we court properly. You want to marry me? Hannah whispered, after just knowing me a week. I know it sounds mad, Fletcher admitted, but I've never been more certain of anything. When I'm with you, I feel complete. If you need time, I understand. Stay with your sister, help with the baby. I'll come back for you in the spring. Hannah looked into his earnest face and knew with sudden clarity what she wanted. I don't need until spring, she said softly, but I would like to be here for my sister when the baby comes. After that, yes. Fletcher's expression transformed with joy. Yes. Yes, Hannah confirmed, laughing as he swept her into an embrace that lifted her feet from the floor. I'll speak to your sister and brother-in-law, Fletcher promised. Do things properly, and I'll come back for you in a month. Rose was delighted with the news, though concerned about Hannah making another winter journey. The passes will be dangerous by then, she worried. We'll take the southern route, Fletcher assured her. Longer but safer this time of year. The day of his departure arrived too quickly. Standing on Rose's porch, Hannah fought back tears as Fletcher prepared to leave. 1 month, he promised, pressing his mother's ring into her hand, a simple gold band with a small pearl. Not an official engagement yet, but a token of my intention. If you change your mind, Hannah silenced him with a kiss. I won't. The month that followed passed in a blur of preparations. Rose's son, William, was born 3 days after Fletcher left a healthy, robust boy who immediately captured Hannah's heart. As she helped care for her nephew, Hannah found herself imagining children of her own children with Fletcher's blue eyes and quiet determination. Letters arrived weekly from the ranch, each one revealing more of Fletcher's thoughts and feelings. He wrote of improvements he was making to the cabin, of books he thought she might enjoy, of his hopes for their future together. Hannah treasured each word, reading the letters repeatedly until the paper grew soft from handling. True to his word, Fletcher returned exactly 1 month later. The reunion was sweet, their time apart having only strengthened their connection. After a week of final preparations and a small engagement celebration hosted by Rose and Richard, Hannah was ready to depart. "Right as soon as you arrive," Rose insisted, tearfully embracing her sister while baby William slept in Richard's arms. "I will," Hannah promised. "And you'll visit in the spring." "Wild horses couldn't keep us away," Richard assured her, adjusting his son in his arms. "We want this little fellow to know his aunt and uncle." The journey back to the ranch took 10 days, following the longer but less treacherous southern route. The winter landscape was breathtaking, and Hannah found herself falling deeper in love with Colorado's wild beauty. Each night, they stayed at roadhouses or with farmers who offered hospitality, always maintaining propriety despite the growing desire between them. "Just a few more days," Fletcher would murmur when their kisses threatened to overcome their resolve. Finally, the familiar outline of Fletcher's cabin appeared on the horizon. Hannah's heart swelled at the sight, not with the melancholy she'd expected, but with a sense of homecoming. Emilio greeted them with obvious delight, having prepared a welcome feast and cleaned both cabins until they gleamed. The small cabin that would be Hannah's until the wedding was charming, a single room with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and windows that faced the mountains. "It's perfect," she told Fletcher as he carried in her trunk. "It's just temporary," he reminded her. "The minister from town can come next month if that suits you." Hannah nodded, suddenly shy. After all the anticipation, the reality of their situation alone together on this remote ranch felt both thrilling and overwhelming. The following weeks established a rhythm to their days. Hannah spent mornings learning the workings of the ranch, afternoons preparing for their wedding and making the main cabin more homelike, and evenings with Fletcher, talking and planning their future. Their courtship deepened, physical desire tempered by the knowledge that their wedding approached. Neighbors from miles around received word of the upcoming nuptials, and many made the journey to meet Fletcher's intended. Hannah was welcomed warmly into the small community, her Eastern education and practical nature earning respect. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the February sun gleaming on fresh snow. In her small cabin, Hannah dressed carefully in a new blue gown that Fletcher had commissioned from the dressmaker in town. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned up her hair, adorning it with sprigs of dried lavender and white heather that Rose had sent. A knock at the door revealed Emilio, resplendent in his best clothes, ready to escort her to the main cabin where the ceremony would take place. "You look beautiful, Señora," he said sincerely. "The patron is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Hannah replied, taking his offered arm. Inside the main cabin, 20 guests had gathered, neighboring ranchers and their families, the shopkeeper from town and his wife, even the blacksmith who had supplied additional materials for Hannah's wagon wheel repair. Fletcher stood by the fireplace with the minister, his usually calm demeanor betrayed by the nervous adjusting of his string tie. When he saw Hannah, his face transformed with such love that tears sprang to her eyes. The simple ceremony passed in a blur, Hannah aware only of Fletcher's steady hands holding hers, the deep timbre of his voice as he spoke his vows, the cool slide of a gold band joining her mother's pearl ring. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Fletcher's kiss was gentle yet possessive, prompting good-natured cheers from their guests. The celebration that followed was joyous, abundant food, music from a neighbor's fiddle, and dancing that continued well into the evening. As the last guests departed, Fletcher closed the door and turned to Hannah, now truly his wife. The air between them vibrated with anticipation. "I've dreamed of this moment," he admitted, crossing to take her in his arms. "As have I," Hannah whispered, tilting her face up to his. Their lovemaking was everything Hannah had hoped for, tender yet passionate, Fletcher's consideration for her pleasure evident in every touch. As they lay entwined afterward, Hannah marveled at the journey that had brought her here, from despair to joy in the span of months. No regrets. Fletcher asked softly, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Hannah smiled up at him. "Only that my wheel didn't break sooner." Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves frolicking in green pastures, wildflowers carpeting the meadows, and the news that Hannah was expecting their first child. "Are you happy?" Fletcher asked as they sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. His hand rested protectively over her still flat stomach. Hannah leaned against his shoulder, contentment filling her. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. Even with a broken wagon wheel on a mountain pass, especially then," she laughed. "Though next time, let's hope we meet under less precarious circumstances." Fletcher kissed her temple. "I don't know, I'm rather fond of mountain rescues. They seem to work out well for me." 7 months later, as the first snow dusted the peaks, Hannah gave birth to a son they named James, after Fletcher's father. Holding their child between them, Hannah and Fletcher exchanged looks of wonder and gratitude. "He has your eyes," Fletcher observed, touching the infant's tiny fingers. "And your determination," Hannah replied as the baby gripped his father's finger firmly. "He'll be strong like his father." Over the years that followed, the ranch prospered. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined the family 2 years after James. Rose and Richard visited often, their son William becoming fast friends with his cousins. Hannah established a small school for the neighboring children, putting her education to good use. And each October, on the anniversary of their first meeting, Fletcher and Hannah would ride together to Raven's Peak, where a simple stone marker now stood. Carved into its face were the words, "Her wagon wheel cracked on the mountain pass. The cowboy said, I'll fix it before snow." Beneath this, Fletcher had added, "Some journeys begin with a broken wheel." On their 20th anniversary, their hair now streaked with silver, they made the familiar pilgrimage. Standing hand in hand before the marker, Hannah felt the same rush of gratitude that had sustained her through 2 decades of joy and challenges shared. "Do you ever wonder," Fletcher asked, his arm around her waist, "what would have happened if I'd taken a different trail that day?" Hannah shook her head. "No, some things are meant to be, like a broken wheel on a mountain pass, exactly like that." Hannah turned in his arms, seeing in his weathered face the same strong, gentle man who had stopped to help a stranger long ago. "I'd break 100 wheels to find you again." Fletcher laughed, the sound echoing across the mountainside. "Let's not test fate. One broken wheel was quite enough." As they rode home together, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, just as they had that fateful day. Hannah looked at the man beside her, at the life they had built, and knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most unexpected detours led to the most perfect destinations. The mountains stood eternal around them, witnesses to their enduring love story, a story that began with a crack in a wheel and ended in the unbreakable bond of 2 hearts joined as one.